Why do you think only 10 people come to Vedanta out of this millions of people who are in the city?
Because they are also looking, but in the wrong place.
Absolutely. Right? So in fact, until now, Arjuna himself was what? Looking in the wrong place. Right? And Lord Krishna and Arjuna were really good friends. They were cousins. Right? Now, Lord Krishna could have told him long ago. Does he do that? No.
He waits for the correct moment.
He waits till Arjuna asks. He's seeking. You have to seek. Like, if the physicist may know lots of things that you can never conceive, he is going to come and knock on your door and say, hey, you learn physics from me, how can you live your life without knowing this beauty of this quantum physics and relativity and all that? You will say, what? What is your value? He spends his whole life looking into that and he's just totally awed by that. And for you, it's what? Of no value. Is he going to come and knock? No. If you see the value, you have to go and enroll, and you have to go there and you have to make an effort to learn. Right? Lord Krishna was exactly the same. Arjuna had to ask for it. He saw the fact that there is no solution and he was looking for solution. And he says, you teach me that knowledge, knowing which I will gain that fulfillment, which otherwise, no matter what I do, I can't find. Neither in the past, nor in the present, nor in the future. Because I'm looking at the wrong place. Okay? So this is where the teaching begins. And this is why this teaching is totally going from one paradigm to the other paradigm. Because every other teaching which retains your I as who? This individual, body, right? Very inherent understanding that we have about our self-identity, self-image is connected to our body, our mind, our senses. So here, this knowledge makes us see the fact that, the statement that na jayate mriyate va kadachita. The body comes into jayate means it's born, and mriyate means it is dying. Now when the body is coming into being and dying, what is our conclusion? I am born and I am dying. So that means in our mind we have no distinction between what? The body and I. It is like the chariot owner thinks I am the chariot. If the chariot owner starts thinking I am the chariot, what will happen? What will happen? Your whole self-image is connected with the chariot. Your whole life will go in what? Making that chariot beautiful. And you can't handle one wheel falling off. You will be one scratch and you will be all upset. This is what we do. So much of our time goes in just what? Beautifying and making it beautiful, which is fine, there is nothing wrong, but there is nothing else. You just continue, you just live like that. Your whole life goal becomes that. That is problem. Okay, so therefore what Vedanta says is, yeah, you have a body, true, and it is useful, true, but if you make that mistake about who you are, and if you don't understand that I'm much more than the body, then this body, which is actually meant for you to use it, right, what will become? It will become a liability, because what you will suffer from all kinds of limitations of self-image, which is based on the body. The asset becomes liability. So you retain, keep it as an asset. Right? Then the five senses. Five senses is exactly the same. Okay? Imagine you have this body, but you have no senses. how will you even come to know the presence of the world? The whole access that you have to this amazing infinite world is through what?
Senses.
Is your senses. So your senses are like what? 5 horses. In that analogy of chariot. Okay. Now you need those. Without the horses, what will the chariot do? We're just stuck in one place. So where you have to go somewhere, and it can't move. So you need those 5 sense organs. Okay. Now if you start thinking I'm the horses, what will happen? Again, it's a problem. It's a problem of what? Reality. Please understand. It has got nothing to do with advice. Whole teaching of Bhagavad Gita is not an advice. It's just making you see the mistakes that we have all made, right? And the wrong understanding with which we live our lives is correcting those mistakes so that we can live efficiently with clarity. Okay? So now, those 5 horses you are not, right? The sense organs you are not. But does it mean that you have to be indifferent to those sense organs? No, you can't be. Because imagine those horses in the chariot are totally untrained. And you have to go somewhere. What will happen?
Disaster.
Disaster. One will run in this direction, the other one will run in that direction. There is no end. One wants to eat, the other one wants to sleep, the other one wants to. So it's like, and this is what, right? That we have been given senses. Senses are not a problem, right? Senses are very necessary, without which you can't even come to know. You have objects, and we are given what? The eyes to see the objects. You have sounds, and you are given what? Ears. You have taste, and you are given tongue. You have the different sensations, and you are given what? Sense of touch. And you have smells, and you are given what? Nose. So that means there are sense objects, and then you have sense organs. And that is, sense organs have to be used appropriately. Okay? If you start thinking that you are the sense organs, then what? There is a problem. So who starts saying that I am sense organ? I've never heard anybody saying I'm sense organ. But we make statements, what? I'm blind. Right? You say I'm deaf. So that, so then I'm colorblind. All these are statements where what is your eye is what? Totally what? Mixed up with the capacity of your sense organs. Okay, so that means there is a cognitive problem. Cognitive problem means what is what. Sense organ, useful, it's a blessing, you have to use it well, but if you start thinking it is I, it's a mistake. So that means you have to free your eye from what? The sense organs. Then the third thing we saw is, which is a huge thing that we have, and that is the mind. Okay? Your eye is totally connected with the mind. So in this case, in this analogy, it is what? In the chariot analogy? The charioteer, right? So that means the chariot owner has lost what? The distance between the owner and the charioteer. Okay? So that means your buddhi, your this whole faculty of that we have, in Sanskrit we call it antahkarana. Antahkarana means, antah means internal, karana means instrument. Okay, so the mind, by the very definition, imagine, look at the word. The word itself says what? It's an inner instrument. Instrument, is it I? No. So that is the beauty of the language. Within the language itself, there is this understanding that I am not this antahkarana. It's an instrument that is given to me. It is an amazing instrument that is given to you. This whole thing, I'm not the mind, I'm not the mind, is like you just don't need that, because this mind is an amazing instrument. There is a physicist in California. His name is Ramachandran, and he was giving a TED talk, and he was using this, and he was saying that there is this 2-3 pound, which is human brain. Human brain weighs 2-3 pounds. And he says it's an amazing instrument. What all can you do with this instrument? How many things you are able to figure out with this instrument? Okay? And it is continuously engaging in the world and figuring out more and more and more and more. Just 100 years ago, what was the knowledge base that we had? And see the knowledge base that we have today. In this 100 years, it's a revolution. Just even go back and see what life was 100 years ago. Okay, none of these gadgets that you have, none of them were there. Today you think your life is not possible without these gadgets, none of them. Electricity itself was probably not so available. Okay, so therefore, human mind is able to engage in the world, discover many things, right? And by discovering many things, what happens? They actually use, that is the difference between the pure scientific research and technology. Technology is what? Applying the scientific discoveries into what? In your day-to-day living. So therefore, human brain is capable of not only figuring out how the world works, but using that to create so many different gadgets which make our life so much easier. So until now, until a few years ago, what was the average age, Victorian times? What was the average age of a person? 35, 40. Few years ago. Right? And now with what? Just understanding the physiology and seeing how it works, and then coming up with medicines to undo the distortions, how much have we been able to increase the longevity? So therefore, this brain is an amazing instrument. Okay, but it is an instrument. Now this instrument, if you start taking it as I, then that's a problem. Okay, so this instrument that you have has 4 facets. The first one we saw was what? Mind, the emoting. The emoting mind is that whenever you see anything, not only you see things, it evokes what? Certain emotions in you. So there you have a range of emotions. Okay, now those emotions, please don't call them negative. As I keep telling everyone, emotions are indicators, right? You have a pain. Is it negative? The pain is physical, pain is negative. Why is it not negative?
Because you have to be aware of it to do something.
Absolutely. Imagine that you didn't have this mechanism of pain. You're crossing the road, right? And something hits you and you're not even aware, and blood will flow and you have no pain. What will happen? What will happen? You will die. This pain is what? An indicator. What is it saying? It needs to be taken care of.
Look after me and treat me.
Exactly. Look after me and treat me. Okay. Same thing with our emotions. The minute you start denying, I'm not the mind, I'm not the emotions, what? What will happen? What will happen? Tell me. There is one fact that yes, it's an instrument, but if you don't take care of it, what will happen?
There will be no compassion.
Absolutely. You'll go haywire. It'll be a mess. So that means this whole emotional life is something you have range of. Human body, human mind is what capable of having different ranges of emotions, and our whole culture recognizes that. You see any classical performance, you go and see Bharatnatyam performance, what will they will have? Some performances, what do? Just rasa, 10 different basic they will depict. Even that includes what? Jealousy. It includes, there is not like this, closing your whole thing to this, oh no, this is a problem, I should not be this, because first of all, these emotions, I have what? No cognitive distance between emotion and I. So when that emotion arises, I said this is negative, I cannot be like that, and then what? I want to dodge it. What happens? I create a divide between what is there, and there is a denial of what is there. When there is a denial of what is there, then it disappears? No. It is there, and it begins to guide your behavior without even your recognizing. It becomes worse and worse. Right? So therefore, one thing is to have a proper relationship with it. Yes, the emotions are there. The mind is designed to have those emotions. There is some aspect which is actually a healthy aspect of that emotion. There is another aspect which is what? Dysfunctional aspect. So what do I need to do? I can never eliminate any emotions. Please understand that. Because I'm going against human program. You can only learn to manage your emotions. Fear. Okay? If you were not given this mechanism of fear, a big snake will come in front of you and you will be what? Oh, everything is one. Oh, let me go and hug it. Right? Make you mad. You have to go to mental hospital. Right? So therefore, this fear is what? A mechanism which is what? Hey, I have to run. So that means, imagine you're trying to eliminate this mechanism. What will you do? Harm yourself. But if, for example, that mechanism which is very necessary for you to live an intelligent life, now that fear becomes a guiding factor in your life, where everything is what? You bring in a lot of fear. Then what? That's a dysfunctional side to that fear. Then what do you need to do? You need to only correct that dysfunctionality so it can flow and do its normal job. Yeah. Sadness. Certain amount of grieving is necessary. When somebody passes away, and this is what happened to me. It's shocking, but how it happens, right? That we were living in Bangkok, and I think I told you this story, right? And there was this teenage one girl and boy, and their father had gone to Europe for a business trip, and he just collapsed and he died. So therefore, these two 18, 19 year kids, they were devastated, and they were crying and they were crying. And somebody comes and, as giving big Gita Jnanam, and says, Na jayate mriyate va kadachit. Atma doesn't die, Atma doesn't go. Maybe a fact. True, it is true. Is this a right time? It's not a right time. They have not gone to this person to what? Learn, get his jnana. They are just grieving. What is an appropriate response at that time? Allow them to grieve.
Be there as a support.
Be there as a support. Any loss, and if it is a significant loss, it takes about 6 months to recover. If you try to interfere in that whole process, you can reduce the cycle, but if you try to deny that, you will, there are people who do that, and they all end up with what, either depression after 10 years, or some physical problem, diabetes. All these are stress related problems, cancer, all kinds of ailments, right? So that means there is a certain, that is a human capacity to distinguish that, hey, this loss means there is grieving, there is sadness. And then where is it that I have to work? If that sadness becomes it consumes me totally, where I'm unable to do any other function, then there is dysfunctionality. So then what do I need to do? I need to work on that dysfunctionality, fixing it to a normal level. Okay, so therefore these emotions are not I, but they have to be handled with a lot of intelligence. So therefore this is what we say, that this is, but in order for me to handle it intelligently, I need to have first, proper relationship with it. If I begin to think that I am as good as my emotion, then there is a cognitive mistake I make. So I need to say, hey, I have this mind, it is capable of emoting, it will have different emotions, but with that emotion, which itself is nothing wrong in that, but that leads to dysfunctionality. So I bring it back. Okay, so that is your relationship with manas. Now this manas is also the second function of manas, is a very important function, and that is what we call sankalpa vikalpatmikaha manaha. Sankalpa vikalpa means when a situation presents itself, right, your buddhi also has capacity, your mind also has the capacity to create what? Choices, options. Now, who is a cultivated person?
A person who exercises choice.
The person who is able to exercise choice and is able to present the number of choices. Generally, our mind works in bipolar way. Bipolar way means either you say, when you say that, let's say somebody has problem with aggressive behavior, right? And you tell the person, this aggressivity is not necessary, then the immediate thing is they'll go back. So are you asking me to just be totally passive? So you create a scenario where there are
Extremes.
just two extremes. But in between those two extremes, there is infinite number of choices. In a finite line, just mathematics, right? Finite line of one foot. How many points are there? Infinite points. Mathematics. In between those two options that we have created for ourselves, how many different options are available to us which we totally ignore. So that means a cultivated mind is
In moderation.
is able to come up with different options that are available, different choices. The more your mind is able to come up with different options, you come out of this situation of either total control and you're freaking out and controlling everything, or totally passive and everything is just destiny and all, so that means proper that creation of right options, that itself is that capacity which is given to you, we highly underutilize it. You need to develop that. The more you think about innovative ways of dealing with that given situation without falling into these two extremes, your life will become fun. because you can always engage and say, yeah, okay, now this I have done, it hasn't worked, let me apply myself and see what else can I do, instead of saying, oh, this is cannot be changed, oh, poor me, and that person is so bad, he'll never change. This is the message we give. We write ourselves off, we write others, we blame the world, and we just get into this whole self-limiting thought processes. We have to come out of it by what? Using this faculty of creating choices. Then life becomes fun. Every challenge becomes fun. Right? So that is what we call the faculty of manas. The second faculty that we have is what we call buddhi. Buddhi is your intellect. Intellect is what we say that when you go to school, right? So most of the time, what are you developing? Your mind, right? So your thinking capacity. So you go and study science, you go and study math, all this, people say, oh, I hate studying math. But that is something which is very much required for you to have logical mind. You need to have logical thinking, rational mind. You have to develop this faculty. Right? So therefore, this is analytical mind, analytical capacities, thinking through things. So this is what we call buddhi. Now, that buddhi also performs another function. What is the other function it performs? Nishchayatmika buddhi. Right? It also makes you what? Within those choices, enables you to what? Make the decisions. So that means the more options you have had, and more that the buddhi enables you to what? Weigh those options, pros and cons of each of those options, and then go with one choice. That is very necessary. Okay, so that is buddhi. Now, the third capacity that you have is chittam. Chittam is what? Memory. Memory itself can be divided into conscious memory and the unconscious memory. Okay, the conscious memory is what, when we use, when I ask you what was your childhood like, and you start telling me stories about your childhood, you're using what? Your memory, right? Because it's not actively going on in your mind, but when I ask you that question, you're able to retrieve that given part, and you're able to give me the answer. In the exam, what are you doing? You're using your memory along with your cognitive capacity. Cognitive capacity has understood something, but you've stored it in your memory, and then what? When the teacher asks you, or in the exam one question is asked, what are you doing? You're retrieving that aspect and you're reproducing it. So memory is something which is essential, and any message that anybody gives you, live only in the present. They don't know what they are talking about. Live only in the present means what? You're like, you don't have any memory. Only in the present. In order to live efficiently in the present, you make use of what? All the learning of your past. And all the learning of your past is stored where? In your memory. Past, present and future are all integral part. You can't what? Eliminate. You're what? Working against the design of the universe. It sounds wonderful, oh yeah. Why does it sound wonderful? Because your memory, which has stored, there are some stories which are stored, which are what? Sad memories. Those sad memories you feel bad about. So then what do you want to do? Eliminate the whole function of memory. This is like, I have a hand, I have a pain, let me cut my hand. When you have pain in your hand, do you need to cut your hand? No, you just need to fix what? Treat that part. Memory is so important. Ask anybody who has Alzheimer's. They forget everything. Okay? And they can't live life. So therefore, memory is important, but there is a possibility of it going what? Dysfunctional, because of those sad memories that are there. Those sad memories become what? Part of your unconscious, because your conscious mind doesn't want to accept it. Then they begin to govern your behavior. Certain external situations will trigger that, activate that part of memory, and you will then what? Act from that pain rather than the present situation. This is why a lot of people say, oh, this person is really good, but when he or she gets angry, oh my God. What happens? The situation triggers what? All that past pain which is not dealt with, and then the person just erupts. Okay? So therefore, this memory also needs to be what? Put in its right place. It's an important function when, and it is very useful, but when it goes a little off, you need to bring it back. Right? So that means, how do you bring back into the track? How would you bring back the memory into track?
So if it's a sad memory, for example, because every experience comes with a lesson. You learn, you analyze that this happened, and this is what I need to take
And you
from
have a
it
choice.
and go ahead.
Excellent. Right? So that means every memory and the pain associated with that memory, right, has to be looked into. And then there are certain assumptions, there are certain conclusions that belong to that time, which may not be totally adequate. Right? So therefore, for example, something happened and you have concluded that my mom doesn't like me, for example. And whole life you suffer from what?
No self-esteem.
My mom doesn't like me, the world doesn't like me, people don't like me. So you keep on what? Changing the different, but you tell different stories. But behind all those different stories, there is one common thread, and that is what? People don't like me. And what is the experience as a child? That my mom doesn't like me. Okay. Now, as Aparna says, how do you undo this memory? You only have to actually look at this memory, and what do? You say, that was my conclusion, my mom doesn't like me. Is it true or not? That was a child's perception. At that time I did feel like that, but is it a reality or not? Because now you have an adult mind. With an adult mind, you can re-understand the situation, not from a child's perception, but from the perception of, or the understanding of an adult. So that means all these assumptions and conclusions that you have, you can actually undo as an adult. So only when you begin to undo, then you put your whole faculty of memory on track. Sorry?
But supposing if in somebody's situation that is really true.
That is true. Yeah, that is true. In some situation it is true. Some situation it may be true, right? Then you can say that, yeah, this is not just a problem of my perception, this is a reality. But how much space that reality occupies in my mind, that is something which is very important. So I can ask myself very consciously, maybe my mom did not love me, but what about my dad? He loved me. What about this friend? That friend loved me. Right? So that means there is a partial, too much weightage given to one event, and all the other events are what?
Based on that.
Are just ignored, and all my future interaction is what? Carrying only the weight of that given event. So what you can do as an adult without denying it, you can say yes, you highlight the other ones.
So that this one doesn't have that kind of weight.
Absolutely. So that means any aligning you have to do, you can't sacrifice the truth. Because if she did not like you really and you start believing, oh, she loved me, it's all nonsense. Whatever you do, it has to be aligned with the truth. So that means when you bring other responses, it is what in keeping with the truth, right? Then what happens is you have skewed your perception. You've just, out of these 100 events, you have taken 2 events and you have
Magnified.
absolutely, and all the 98 events you've ignored. So now in your process of bringing it back into track, what do you need to do? You need to remind yourself of all the other 98 events, in light of which the impact of those 2 events will become what? Automatically. Yeah, exactly. You have to do it.
For all
Okay.
this, you need to be really sharp up there.
Absolutely. You need to be, for Vedanta, if you want to be a good student of Vedanta, you need to be sharp. Not some, oh yeah, I'm whole and I'm Satchidananda Atma, and it's all floating up in the air. Oh, this body is all, exactly.
So how do you sharpen that intellect?
So by keep on, see, first of
How
all,
do you know you're making the right choice?
Yeah,
you
so
know
automatically
you may be
know.
making right
Yeah.
choice because it actually may be suiting you, but actually it's
Exactly.
not right around you.
You
How
give
do you
yourself
know?
justification.
so that's why you have to listen to,
Sometimes.
so that means you have to listen to this teaching, because this is only the 2nd chapter, right? How many chapters of Gita? 18 chapters of the Gita. Within this teaching itself, I told you, Arjuna had 2 questions. What are the 2 questions he had? What is the bigger picture of bigger meaning, and the second is what? How to live my life with understanding this bigger reality. Both are addressed. There are many, many different frameworks which are given to help you to bring your day-to-day thinking in alignment. But you have to listen carefully, and you have to apply it to your life.
To stay in awareness.
Because unless that job, me as a teacher, what can I do? I can just impart. I can impart that clarity, but the job of what? Shedding your own baggage, and re-embellishing your psyche with the proper understanding, that job you only can do for yourself. I can't do it for you. But I can give you certain frameworks which are extremely powerful, which are not my frameworks, these are all Gita and Upanishads. We are blessed, this culture is blessed with this knowledge. Very holistic knowledge. It incorporates both sides. One is the bigger picture, and the second is the smaller picture, which has to then be aligned with this bigger picture. And making right choices, right decisions, dealing with your mind, all that is given. It's a complete knowledge. Okay, so therefore, the memory, and the 4th one is what we call ahankara. Okay, now this ahankara, I wanted to reiterate, because you must understand, this is really the crux of Vedanta. If you don't understand it's right, then you're building everything on wrong understanding. And you want to be spiritual, but you're actually what? Creating more and more subjectivity. So that's why understanding this part is very, very critical. Okay, ahankara. If I use Sanskrit, as I told you, the Sanskrit itself lends itself the meaning. Aham is I. Kara means what? There is a sense of I, which is not really the I. Aham is I. But ahankara is what? This sense of I, which is what? Not at the right place. So therefore, which is the 4th faculty of thinking? 4th faculty of thinking is, what is interesting is that when you have emotions, let's say that of fear, not only you experience a fear, what do you say to yourself?
I'm frightened.
I am So that means there is this I thought which gets connected with what? That emotion that is existing at that given point in time. Right? Now imagine if the emotion changes. Now somebody says you saw a snake, and then somebody says that it is actually a rope. What happens? The emotion changes, and then what do you say? I'm no longer scared. So that means the emotions keep changing, and along with that you create a story. What is your story? You connect your I with whatever is happening. Right? So that means there is an I thought, and that I thought which it gets loaded with what exactly whatever is the current emotion. So that means your I thought gets connected. Now that is how also human brain is. Please understand. Human brain is like that. You have this I sense. Right? Now what happens is, now even your cognitive capacity. So let's say you go to school and you are able to understand, let's say teacher is teaching math and teacher is teaching physics, and you are able to grasp. What will you tell yourself? I'm intelligent, I'm clever. So that means your cognitive capacity is sharp, you are able to follow what the teacher is saying, but where are you attributing it to? I am intelligent. Right? Then you have memory. What is memory? Memory is like all these screenshots that are stored. There is a physical place in your brain where it gets stored. Right? But when I ask you, so how was your childhood? What will you say? I did this, I did that. So that means those memory frames get connected to what? I. So that means there becomes actually each of these thoughts, how long do they stay? Fleeting. There is not one thought. Try to stretch a thought. The duration of a thought. You can't have a duration of thought which is more than few seconds. Okay? If it is just a few seconds, why this story that you have told about your I is such a solid story? Because your emotions can change. One thing which remains always with, no matter what emotion changes, is I. Your mind can switch from emotional mode to cognitive mode, and whatever and cognitive capacity you use either very well or not so well, and it again gets loaded with what? I. Then you have your memories. Then that also gets loaded with I. So that means this I constantly changes with what? 3 different functions, but it always is always present, because that I continues to be what? Connected to the 3 functions. That's why it gets what? Solid entity. It becomes a solid entity in our own understanding. So a lot of your all self-image, what you think about yourself, what you think about the world, because while all these things are happening, you also tell yourself a story of what is happening, because you need to make sense of yourself, and you need to make sense of the world and your place in that world. So every situation that happens, right, and not only you take it all, load it all onto I, but then with that loading you need to give sense to that story. Imagine in a film you have all these different frames, and there is no underlying story. How will it be? Disjointed, just all jumbled up images. You can't make sense of it. So therefore, in this world, in order for you to live well, what we are given that inherent capacity to what? Make stories. But that story itself either what it can be a right story, or it can be what
Made up.
totally distorted story. So that means my ahankara can be relatively healthy, or it can be what? Totally dysfunctional. Right? Now, imagine this ahankara, according to Vedanta, is only one of the functions of the mind, and we have taken it as what? The ultimate reality of I. So the very fact that I understand that there is this I sense, and there is a human brain which is what connecting that I sense to all these three different functions, and it creates an entity, a solid entity, where actually there is no real solid entity. It's a fluid. It's in a constant flux. Okay, and who are you? I am something which is observer of what? All these changing frames. That itself will give you what? A huge cognitive distance of what? Between your ahankara and the real I. It is that I sense is in that imagery. What is it connected to? The charioteer. The charioteer is telling oneself a story of what's happening, where he's going, or whatever. And if the chariot owner knows that this charioteer is what? Not I, but it is something which is what required to take me where I want to go, then all the problems, where do they belong? To I or the charioteer? The charioteer. That itself is an extremely liberating thing. Because the load, that ahankara, there is a basic distinction between Atma and ahankara. And we live our life having no cognitive distance between ahankara and Atma. Now, if I understand that this I is actually distinct, because this ahankara is just a fluid entity, keeps on getting connected here, there, all that, right? And it seems solid because it's almost like invariable in every connection. Then can you just say, okay, then it's not an absolute reality about myself, let it be doing whatever it is doing? Can you say that? No. Because that self-image is so distorted. If in case it is so distorted, what choice do you have but to what? Understanding that I'm independent of it, you still need to correct it. You need to correct it because that, imagine that this Atma that Vedanta Shastra talks about is, you will see, I will tell you now, right? That this Atma is Sat Chit Ananda. I will show you. Now you don't just listen. Okay? According to Gita and according to Upanishad, this Atma is not only free from your mind, but it is something which is limitless. Imagine. I'll show you how. Right? Imagine that this is the reality about you, but you think about yourself as what? I'm no good. And you feel, oh my God, Can these two things coexist in your understanding as same truths? Can on one hand limitlessness, and on the other hand feeling useless?
You have to identify with one. You can't.
Exactly. So therefore, one has to become so strong that the other one is what? Naturally dropping. Until now, which is the one which is really strong?
I'm useless.
Limited, lacking, or everybody. There is no human being, anybody who says that, yeah, I have this great superior, that itself is also compensation for that inadequacy.
There's a
sense of lack.
There is which then they need to overcompensate, and they need to show how good and how powerful and how they are. Okay, so that means this story of yours, which you have created based on certain functions, has to what? Slowly, first what? It has to, that old story has to dismantle. The new story has to be created, which is based on what?
The proper understanding.
The proper understanding of things. Healthy self-image, healthy interaction with the world. It also has to be embellished. That I sense, you need a healthy I sense. You can't just totally eliminate it. Ahankara, anybody who tells you that ahankara has to be eliminated, they don't know what they are talking about. Ahankara is a function. It's a function of your mind. Otherwise, then people will become pseudo-spiritual and they will say, oh, this body is walking. Instead of saying, I am walking, they will say, the body is walking. That is nonsense. It's a function. It's a function. You use that function. Okay? But your understanding is what? That I am much more than this function. That is the cognitive distance. That is reality. It's based on reality. So this ahankara, either it can be relatively healthy or it is unhealthy. What the first step is to what? To make it healthy. The second step is to what? See that even if it is healthy, it is only one of the aspects of the mind. And who am I? I am much more than that. Right? So that means this mana. So there is a beautiful Shankaracharya song in which everybody sings. Right? Anybody who comes to Vedanta, they all sing that. Mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. There is have you heard this? This is Mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham. This is what it is saying. Adi Shankaracharya opens the song with this. Mana, I am not. Yeah. Buddhi, I am not.
That's what we sang at.
Chittam, I am not. Ahankara, I am not. Then who am I? Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. This is our vision. Who are you? You are that Sat Chit Ananda. So now this is something that I need to show you how. Right? Otherwise it's not like, yeah, you're not this and you're this Satchidananda Atma and then you just have to believe me or you have to just believe the Upanishads or Gita. So we have to understand that what if all this is what I thought I am, and if I'm not, then the next question is, who am I? Right? It's not enough to just say I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. It doesn't give me the answer. But why do I need to go through that?
To know who you really are.
Because my I sense is connected with all this. I first have to understand it's not this. Only then I can understand what it is. Because if I tell you that you're, let's say, if I say that Atma is always Shuddha. Shuddha means always pure. And if you think I am as good as the body, what will you understand?
Unlimited.
I am what? My body is Shuddha. But body can be Ashuddha. So I first need to negate that this Atma that I am talking about is not what? The body that you are talking about. That's a method. Please understand. It's a method of my communicating, because if I don't explicitly say that, you will only operate from who you think you are, and every word that I use will get imputed on what? So when I say you're Shuddha, almost everybody starts thinking my mind is always pure. But is Vedanta talking about that? No. So that means it's very important to understand what we are talking about. Otherwise, if your Atma is as good as the body, anything that I talk about Atma, you will think that what it is relating to either body or it is relating to mind. And even after I make it so explicit, the habit of equating Atma to mind is so what? So strong. So you constantly, whatever I talk, in spite of negating whatever I say now, you will still unknowingly, what will you do? Connect the two. Right? So imagine if I didn't say that, you will connect without ever realizing it. Even after telling, you will still continue to connect. So if I didn't tell you that, then what? It will be just, you'll connect it at all levels. So now let's look at, if you're none of these, you're not the body, you're not the senses, you're not the four aspects of mind, chittam, buddhi, manas and ahankara, then who are you? Okay, so this is where the Upanishads talk about, it says pratibodha viditam matam. Okay, so now imagine what is the relationship you have with the mind. How many different thoughts the mind has per day? Almost 60,000. Who are you?
The observer of the thoughts.
So that means you have what? Certain, what we call chit. Chit means awareness. Awareness because of which you come to know the presence of what? One thought. When that thought goes and another thought comes, you come to know what? The presence of that second thought. In between two thoughts, there is silence. Who are you? The observer of the silence. I'm so happy you said that, because you are not the silence. If you think you are the silence, when the thought comes, what will happen? You disappear. But do you disappear? No. Right? So that means you are that invariable presence because of which you come to know the coming and going of the thoughts. Okay? And that presence is Chit Swarupa. Chit Swarupa means it is awareness. In English, we have two words. One is awareness, the second one is consciousness. Right? So now, this consciousness that we talk about, when I talk about consciousness, people think that it is what? The consciousness of mind. Okay? So here we are not talking about something which is what? One of the four aspects of mind. What we are talking about is that which is independent of these four functions. Right? So that means this awareness because of which you can see different aspects of your mind. That Chit is independent of that. Okay? So now you have this. Now what is the nature of that awareness? So there, here he says that is ajaha nityaha shashvataha ayam puranaha na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Okay, this awareness which is there, it is when hanyamane sharire is what? When the body goes, that awareness, it is never gone. Okay, and what is its nature? Ajaha. Ajaha means which is not born. So when the body is born, that awareness is what? Is it born along with the body? No. It is already there. Right? So now it is nityaha, not subject to time. Shashvataha means it is something which does not undergo any change. Right? And it is puranaha, it's ever new. Right? What does it all mean? It means now this awareness, if I do this inquiry and I say I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the senses, I'm this awareness, she does this inquiry and she says what? I'm awareness. She says I'm awareness. She says I'm awareness. Then the question is, how many awarenesses are there in this world?
There's only one awareness. There is only one.
So there is, okay, how did you come to that?
Is that mean?
The petrol in the car is just one petrol. There are different cars. So the same fuel is used.
So how do you know that the petrol is also with reference to Atma? I mean, I can give you another analogy,
So
but
life
there are
force.
so many
The
cars.
same life force and elements, each one gives us that same energy.
So is it energy? Is Atma energy? Energy is within time and space. Okay. You need to understand.
Yeah.
It's the
On which the
substratum.
changes take.
Like your ocean is a substratum, your waves will come and go, but the ocean will never change, the substratum never changes.
Okay, but why are you making this statement? See, how?
The same part. Yeah, because we all
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
No, Lord. I mean, I'm saying.
Yeah, we've all heard
Okay.
it. And
So
we
you've all
learned.
heard it and you've heard. See, the one thing is very interesting, that you have one example. Oh yeah, because the car and petrol is one relation.
Yeah.
So therefore, the Atma and the body also have that same relationship. Who says? I can use another example and I'll give you a total counter, right? And now I'll say now who of the two is right, right? Who we don't know, right? So therefore, you need to employ reasoning. Okay. Otherwise, it just becomes because Upanishad say, because Gita says, therefore I'm taking it, but I don't quite know why I'm saying it, And I'll give some random examples, and somebody who understands a little bit of anything will give another counter, and I don't know how to answer. Right? So therefore, we need to inquire systematically. If I say I am awareness, right? Then in order for me, please understand, this is logic. This is just logic. It's like mathematics. If I say I'm awareness and if she says that she's awareness, right? Now, in order for me to establish that there are two awarenesses, I need to give characteristic to my awareness which is distinct from her awareness. Then only I can establish that my awareness is different from hers. Right? Now, what attribute will I give to my awareness which is going to make it distinct from her awareness? Every point where there is a distinction is what? The body, there is a distinction. So there are two bodies. Mind, there is a distinction. So there are two minds. True. Senses, there are distinctions. So she has 5 set of senses, I have 5 set of senses. So in all that, there are attributes which are different. She has her height which is different, my height is different, so I can say there are two. And it's true. If I have taken out the body, mind, senses, what attribute will I give to my awareness which will make me say it is distinct from hers? I have nothing left. Please understand, this is logic. It's not some random one example and random some other example. Right? So therefore, in fact, logically, nobody can say that there are two awarenesses. There are many bodies, true. There are many minds, true. But if I have freed that awareness from the body and mind, there is no distinguishing character which will distinguish my awareness from your awareness. So that means this is a huge thing. What does it mean? That I have my awareness and her awareness and her awareness and your awareness. It's all what?
Part of one.
Is it part of one or is it one?
One.
It is one. right? It is one all pervading awareness. Okay, now how do I comprehend that? Please understand that this example that I give doesn't prove anything, it only shows, it represents something with reference to the point that I am trying to make. Okay, now if I say that there is inside this cup, there is what? Space. So there is glass space, and inside that other cup there is what? Space. There is a glass space. There, inside that cup, there is cup space. Inside that pot, there is pot space. How many spaces are there?
There's one space.
One space. Physics, right? How then can I say that this is what? Glass space, and that is pot space, and that is stool space? How? This glass as though creates what?
A division.
A division as though. Not real, it doesn't cut space, please understand. It as though creates a division, and with reference to this glass, this becomes what? Glass space, and everything else becomes what? The external space. So this is inside space and this is outside space from the standpoint of what?
The glass.
This glass. But what is the reality?
There is one space.
There is one
There happens to be a glass
undivided.
within that space itself.
Absolutely. The reality is that there is one undivided space within which
There is a glass.
this glass, that pot, everything exists. Building space, everything.
If you break everything.
Yes.
that's- yeah. You just-
Exactly. So therefore, this is like awareness. So when the glass is born, we say what? The glass space is born. But the space was there before the glass was born or not?
Yes.
It was always there. So here it says ajaha. Awareness is always there. When the body is born, the awareness as though what?
Is inside the body.
We experience it as what? Inside the body. So body is born, and then what? That awareness which was always there, almost as though gets captured by the body. So therefore, it was already there before. Ajaha. Okay. Now, it is something which is, so all bodies come into being and they go, but awareness is something which is what? Always there. It is always there, and now look at this relationship, right? Now, this glass has this parameters, so therefore glass space is this much space, right? This pot has what? Much bigger space. Does that actually change the size of space?
Is it more or less?
Because the space is never divided. So therefore, the reality is the space seems to assume a size where actually it has no size. It does. I mean, apparently it does assume. Please understand. It assumes without actually doing it. Right? So therefore, each body is different, right? And the awareness seems to what? Assume the characteristics of the body. Now, so that means if you look at it from that standpoint, this seems like what? It seems like little space, that seems like bigger space, right? Now, what is inside this glass? Let's say there is water, okay? And what is inside that pot? Mud. Now, this inside water is representing, let's say, the mind. So somebody's mind is transparent like water, and somebody's mind is all bends like mud. Right? Does it affect the space? Does it contaminate the space? No, never. The forms are different. The minds are different. Okay? The awareness pervading everything, right, is what essentially free from what the characteristic of the body and characteristics of the mind. The space never gets what, it's not that the clarity belongs to water. Please understand, the clarity doesn't belong to the space. The denseness belongs to earth. The denseness doesn't belong to space. Space is already free. One undivided whole. Atma. Okay? Atma is ajaha. When the body is born, it is not born. Okay? Nityaha. This is a very big thing. Right? Now this you need to understand well. I will introduce it. No, I think it's too late now. It's 1:45. Because it is a very, very important thing. Nityaha word, it means, right now, what have I explained? I have explained that awareness has no boundaries. Right? It is one and it pervades through everything. And every form seems to enclose it without whatever enclosing it. And all the characteristics belong to forms and not to awareness. Right? Now, the next step you need to understand, and that will take away all these funny ideas about, oh, it's just energy. It doesn't have anything to do with energy or anything. Okay? Its relationship with time and space. The whole universe that we talk about is three things. You ask any scientist, what is universe? It says time, space, object, framework. That is called universe. There is a time and space, and within this time and space is what? All the different objects. Now, the next question is, where is awareness? Is it one of the objects within time and space, or it is the truth of time and space? Nityaha. Nityaha means what?
Eternal.
Eternal means what?
It was there prevailing before the universe, everything was born.
Excellent. That means it is the truth of time. Eternal, you don't know what it means, right? It means, what you are saying is right. It means that which is not subject to time, but it is the very truth of time. Nityaha. Right? How? It's all examined. Like mathematics. So I will show you how it is so next time. Okay. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vedanta Shastra is just a gift to humanity. It is just so brilliant. It's just true. I can't believe that texts like this can exist in this universe.
Thank you. people just randomly say it's beyond time, beyond space.
Exactly. They don't understand
the
how.
logic. Because then they
Yeah.
say building that like this, that when electricity and the fan works and this works and that works and bulb. But then that whole basic is energy.
Exactly.
Or
And
a
the
building you
energy
create, the space
itself is
there.
within time and space. So you see, they don't know what they are talking about. So that's why Vedanta has to be handled
Then
very